Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you've been having a good conference. Thank you for coming. I'm Joe Tubia. This is Dipali Kishnani. We work at Dell Technologies, specifically within a group we call Dell Digital. Dell Digital for Dell and EMC. In fact, let me go to the slide. I'm the product leader of a commerce platform, or the commerce platform that powers Dell.com and the business side of Dell.com we call Premier, as well as our internal sales ecosystems. Dipali is a product manager for one of these commerce platform teams. So I'm going to start by explaining what a commerce platform is, some of the challenges that we faced, and what digital transformation meant to us. Additionally, Dipali will also share her transformation experience and insights within this product team I referred to within the commerce platform. So in addition, before I get into what a commerce platform is, for those of you who do not know what Dell Technologies really is, it's 7 brands combined. And as I mentioned, we work on the Dell EMC side of it. So what is a commerce platform? There's really 2 main objectives to a commerce platform. And I'm going to tell you what they are and then give very simple examples. Number 1, there's a speed to market objective. And that means specifically for what we call a front office, or traditionally an experience tier, UX, something that your consumers, your sales makers, human beings touch and feel. So how do you deliver incremental capabilities quicker than you currently do? So speed to market, and then secondly, consistency. How do you go from a mobile device to a browser to any other medium and get the same consistent experience? That is the 2 high-level objectives of a commerce platform. So let me give, like I said, 2 simple examples of how you do this. So for the speed to market, I think many of you have gone through website experience and you see payment methods as a drop-down. That drop-down, and again, this is a super simplified example, can have a requirement to change where perhaps it isn't a drop-down. It's a set of radio buttons or whatever. That's a UX concern. Front office. Platform would be, what are the payment methods available for this specific user in this specific context? And back office would be, do I even have Bitcoin as a payment option to begin with to then offer the front office? So with that proper separation, again, this is a very simple example, you could potentially make and deliver the change without affecting the back office and potentially just leverage the commerce platform with data updates, as opposed to a software development exercise. Second example, consistency. As I said, your price point, actually I didn't say this, your mobile versus your desktop experience, you could have different prices that show up, and the idea is that if there was let me review this. You have a MSRP that's determined in your back office. Company comes up with a product, this is what I think it should be. On your platform side, you could then say, well, for this customer, I want to discount it and go through a bunch of other pricing workflows and override what the back office is doing. And then on the front office, again, I get the same price on different mediums because I'm using the same platform. So the reason for the platform, again, is twofold. Being able to deliver something quickly and being able to deliver consistent experiences. And that is the group we're in. Now, let me explain some of the challenges we had. There was 3 main pillars. First, with people. A lot of teams were working in the same code base. And in fact, they were doing this across geographic regions. So a lot of quality issues in terms of builds are broken. I'm not quite sure what team 1 was doing versus team 2. And the idea was that you're scaling with people, but the reality was you really aren't. You're creating more of a challenge for a quality-based code base. 2, teams needed outside help, meaning some role outside of the team to come help unblock them in the middle of something very critical that they couldn't sort out themselves. As far as process, we, like many organizations, we're pretty centrally planned and have deadlines and product launches that we need to meet. And so some of the challenges there was it was very difficult to get a feedback loop quick enough to anticipate what the next changes were. So if you had to wait n number of months to only figure out that what you've done for that period was not necessary, it was just too long of a feedback loop. And conversely, the releases were too long. Lastly, on the technology, again, a lot of organizations probably suffer from the same challenges of having applications doing way too much. So what you get there is a situation where a new engineer doesn't want to touch potentially an application because they're not quite sure what the ramifications of that single change will be. So splitting up that application or applications is critical, as I'll show in the next slide. Also, not being 12-factor makes things very difficult. Any compliance updates, security patches, big ordeal. You need to get the engineers with the infrastructure team. It's not a quick done without. It's not a thing that could be done without all the groups coming together. Networking, infra, and the software team. So, change was needed. And hence this digital transformation. So the reason why I want to show how we define it is because I want to stress the culture aspect of this. Any organization can say there's a change we need to do and that's where we need to go, but it's really the culture that needs to change to sustain what you initially have gone through. So you could make headway and say, okay, we met the objective, but then the reversion to the mean back to your previous behavior is very tempting if you don't have the culture there with you to continue that iterative, essentially perpetual change from where you've begun. So, the Dell Digital Way. What were the changes? On the people side, the concept of a balanced team. I'm sure you've heard already a lot about this from some of the other speakers, and as well as Pivotal themselves, if you've engaged. Product mindset, being able to go away from this, I'm just taking a request for a program to what am I actually building, what is my product. As far as the process, pretty much moving away from that centrally planned approach to something, again, more iterative, all things agile, TDD, basically what's written up here. And then very importantly, close partnership with your business stakeholders, shorten that feedback loop. One big deal for us was this the DevOps concept, which isn't crazy to some maybe, especially those of you who might be in smaller companies. The developer is your operator in a sense. What they build is what they maintain. To large organizations, that tends to be split up, and joining those efforts is critical to go back to how do you actually deploy something to production with quality? Well, it would help to have the same people that built it supporting what they deploy. And then lastly, breaking away from your monolith approach to something decoupled. BCF obviously is going to help you out tremendously in that area. And 12-factor. So now that same security patch can be done without even involving the application team. It's just done over the weekend just in case something goes wrong. But again, application teams are not needed. So that's the Dell Digital Way. And then let me tell you a little bit about our journey overall. When we started, it was a very small effort, the smaller circle there. Leveraging that Dell Digital Way I was referencing, we actually started in a building away from where the rest of the platform teams were to start that culture that I was referring to. And the idea was question everything, start all over again in this little incubator. Whatever you learn, bring it back to the larger fold. And now, as of today, we have 45 teams. We're not quite all transformed on all the teams, but that smaller circle now is growing and will eventually be the full circle. So 2 more things to point out here. We had loads of help from Pivotal, vis-a-vis the Pivotal labs. This small effort was technically in a lab. All things PCF, all of our technology transformation was leveraging PCF. And then even Pivotal Tracker was quite a change for us as far as our product management practices. And then lastly, if I could go back here to this earlier slide, one thing I didn't call out purposely was these outer boxes. What the intention was originally was, yes, we want to do things all on PCF, but we also want to leverage our entire portfolio. What a wonderful message that is to our customers to say, you're shopping for our products using our products and services. So we did take a lot of consideration into our architecture to make sure that we could actually deliver the entire platform capabilities within PCF that is leveraging VMware on our storage and servers within our own data center, secured with our services. Okay. Now, let's get back to where we were. Dipali is going to share her transformation experience in one of our platform teams, one of these 45. And specifically, it's in a domain that we call product, quote unquote, which is responsible for modeling a sellable item within the commerce flow. Go ahead, Dipali.
Thank you, Joe. Hello, everyone. So let's get started. On 7 September 2016, something really interesting happened. Something that helped us reshape and remodel the way we looked at our commerce platform. Dell and EMC came together in one of the biggest tech mergers of the industry. And the problem statement in front of us was no longer limited to giving better and faster access to product information for customizations and configurability on the Dell platform, but was expanded to put the EMC products on our platform. What if tomorrow Dell wants to put VMware products on the platform? Or what if Dell acquires a company which has product data phenomenally different from both Dell and EMC? So what we were essentially looking for was a common platform that can provide us configurability, customization, adaptability, and scalability. A good product answers 3 domains. Does it build for the users? Does it help the business? And does it use the right technologies? Therefore, our digital transformation journey was not limited to breaking of monoliths into microservices, but had a blend of people and process in it as well. So when I talk about this journey of product team at Dell Commerce Platform, I'm going to cover all these 3 domains of technology, people, and process. So let's talk about technology first. Research pointed out that in the year 2015, the human attention span had fallen to 8.25 seconds. The attention span of a goldfish, on the other hand, is 9 seconds. So as marketeers, we are literally trying to sell our products to goldfish. Research also pointed out that people have a tendency to leave web pages within 10 to 20 seconds of visiting them if they do not find the right information on it. So as the product team on the platform, we are always striving to give faster and faster access of product information. And we realized that we really cannot achieve this if we do not go and revamp our technology and our design. So every organization comes with its own master data management. For those of you who are not familiar with what an MDM is, master data management is a method used to define and provide access for an organization to give its critical data as a single point of reference. So in this context, both Dell and EMC would have its own separate MDM. What I'm essentially trying to say is that we are trying to bring a laptop, a server, or even a service that Dell offers in the same canonical definition. It really is as hard as it sounds because you're talking about products that have different configurations, different components, different configurabilities, and so much more. But we also realized that if you're able to solve this problem, we can literally bring any product on our platform anytime. So what we are trying to say is that we talk to these multiple product masters, which are basically the MDM definitions, via the product adapters. These product adapters then do the transformation and bring this definition in our commerce product master, which is then available to various product APIs via the APIs, which our sister microservices can consume, like pricing or any other services that we have in the system, like validation and so much more. The product tools is basically the place where you do the merchandising and authoring. What if you are a startup and you do not have an MDM of your own? We still have the ability to onboard you on our platform using these product tools. What if Dell wants to sell a laptop in India and maybe not in Japan? Your store back is probably where you'll go and configure that for the business. And what if you want to have a separate look and feel for your product for a different type of customer? Your store experience is where you'll probably go and talk about it. And finally, all this information is available to various systems through the order management and fulfillment adapters and so much more. So my team is essentially this layer of product adapters that you see. So what are we trying to achieve? We're a pretty small team. So our aim was all the business requirements that we had basically drilled down to this. We had these requirements of taking in data from multiple MDMs and then providing it to the commerce platform using the transformation. When we started off, we really did not know what's the right product that we want to use. We did a lot of research and we found out that a pipeline made the most sense because a pipeline does extract, transform, and load. And if you look carefully, this is exactly what we are trying to do. We're talking to multiple sources, we are doing the transformation, and then pushing this data to the APIs. But while a pipeline really solves this problem at the most basic level, there are certain things that we still needed to answer to business. For example, as the product intake team, we wanted the ability to do mass and batch loads of product data with real-time stream and monitoring capabilities, and also the stream batch abilities to be able to do that. We also wanted to meet critical business SLAs and to be able to scale to the load. There was so much more on the top of the pipeline that we wanted to do. So how did we really decide all the technologies that we did? We have followed a very methodological approach. These are a subset of the factors that we took into consideration. We pitted technologies against each other, and then we decided which technology was the best one for us. The platform was PCF for the entire commerce platform for also because what Joe mentioned about we using Dell on Dell, and also because it was company-wide accepted and it has a lot of popularity in the marketplace. For the pipeline, we actually pitted, we looked at Mule, we looked at Camel, and we looked at SCDF. Because of Spring Cloud Data Flow's inherent ability to get integrated with PCF so quickly and so easily, we were much more inclined towards it than anything else. For messaging, RabbitMQ was actually a no-brainer because most of the team in the commerce platform are using RabbitMQ, so we had the expertise on the team. And also when you're deciding on a messaging system, it's always better to look at a system which everyone else is using because those are the teams that you're going to talk to. The key point here is that we were really not bound by any technology. We really had the context with us, and we could go and use any technology that we wanted, given the reasoning that we were using that technology was correct. So if you see in my team, we have both .NET developers and Java developers. We are using AngularJS, we're using JavaScript, we're using New Relic, Kibana, and so much more that I've not mentioned here. So how do we go get this team of rockstar engineers who can literally just run any technology under the umbrella and go apply it on products? We go and transform our people and process. But before I move on, Joe would like to share a story with us on technology.
Absolutely. Little anecdotal story. When we were, and we still are transforming in the early stages, I specifically had somebody reach out to me from our marketing department saying, look, we have DellEMC.com where we want to generate or funnel the leads of people interested in our products to this specific way, and we have an application we're hosting on a public cloud provider. Let's put it this way. What can we do within your teams to bring this in-house? And I said, what is it running on? what kind of technology? I think it was a Python application. So anyways, within about a day or two, I had the team provision a PCF org and one space for this marketing group, and said, here's your boilerplate pipeline. Go ahead and deploy here. This will be available on this URL as soon as you do it. And within a day or two, they had taken what was hosted off-prem, on-prem, and that's when I think it started to hit home for some of the groups that were not in the platform that, okay, there's something different that we're doing here. And it really highlighted the power of using PCF, obviously, to be able to not go through the formal process of provisioning hardware and where is it going, who's the owner, who's allowed to deploy, and just have a sort of a PCF cloud-native approach to leverage a pipeline with the existing processes that we had come up with for the platform effort. So again, that hit home, and I think as we'll go, there's a couple more anecdotal stories about how using PCF, the Pivotal Labs methodologies that we incorporated, how it really helped change the variables that we had before. Go ahead.
Thanks, Joe. This one is actually a personal story and takes me back 3 years in my career. When I started off as an engineer, I really was in a team where I did not even know what was meant by digital transformation, let alone understand the meaning of it. And I was working as an engineer in this team, and I was just taking the requirements from the product owner, go execute them during the sprint, and that was it. One day, my product owner came to me and said that there is this customer expo happening. Would you like to collate a deck of what our customers look like and go present it there? I was pretty surprised. This team had like the entire department dedicated to customer relations, but I was excited, so I took on it. And when I did research, I found out that the customers of my product were actually cancer hospitals within US, were actually airports all over the world, and were organizations that were very, very critical in terms of the government agencies and a lot of work that they did. I remember this time when I was researching on this that I found out that once when our product went down, we got a message from the customer saying that, thank God, there is no loss of human life. And this entire experience of knowing my customer changed me so phenomenally that next day when I went to work, we were given this rule that when you push your code to production, you have to get it reviewed by at least 2 engineers. I would go ahead and get it reviewed by 2 more because I never wanted to be the reason for any code to break into production. So that's the kind of user empathy I had with just one experience of knowing my customers. Now imagine the power of an organization where everybody literally understands what the customer looks like and who are we building for. Now how do we go build this organization and reorganize our people in such a way? Enters the concept of balanced teams. The concept of balanced team was introduced by Pivotal Labs to blend in the practices of agile, UI, UX, lean principles, and technologies. Think of it this way. Imagine you have a product sponsor who has invested money in you, who has given you a vision, and your job as a balanced team is to go build a product and iterate over a solution against that vision. So we have 3 engineering pairs. We have a UX designer, we have a tech anchor, and we have a product manager. And all of these teams are working against a common vision defined by that sponsor. I completed my training 2 years back with the Pivotal Labs, and there is one key thing that has really stood out even to this day, and that is, what is the definition of a good product? Will it solve for the users? Will it help the business? And can we build it well? It really is about an answer to these 3 questions. The lean principles or the UI UX practices that we follow or the engineering XP practices that we follow are just answers to these questions. So in the construct of a balanced team, you really are trying to bring all these perspectives together. So now that we have organized our team into balanced team, what are some of the key accomplishments and some of the changes that we saw as part of our people process? Number 1 is empathy with users. So my team has 3 to 4 consumers, And I categorically use the word consumers because the consumers are literally just engineers within Dell who are consuming our microservices. And these teams are geographically separated by multiple time zones. My team saw a huge problem in the way we operated. So if you look at our technology, we are a pipeline. We don't have a UI. We don't have an API. It's very hard for our consumers to see what's happening in the system. So we have had these times when the consumers would just call us at night and say that, something is not working. And when my engineers of the team saw this, they knew what the solution was. I'm going to talk about that tool as part of the processes, but the idea is they built this great tool which can really help you see what's happening in the pipeline at what point, what product, what events came in, how long they took to get processed, and so much more. So that's the kind of user empathy that came out. They saw a problem, they knew how to solve it, just went ahead and did it because they had the user empathy. Own the product. We really own the product end to end. And when I say ownership, I mean right from the time that we have to provision the infrastructure to the time that we have to wake up for calls at 12 a.m. That's all us. And if we want to say no to a feature, that's also us. So we basically make and decide all the outcomes of the product. So the team owns the decisions right from the start to the end. Validation of assumptions and questioning of the whys. I'm going to keep both of these together. I'll go back to my example of a product sponsor. So think of it this way. Think of it like a small startup where an investor has invested in you. You really don't want to build the wrong product. You cannot go 3 months later and say, hey, I was working, but just nobody's ready to buy the product, or I just did not have the right users for it, or anything like that, because somebody has invested money in you. And the same is true for us. We cannot go 3 months later and not generate a business value. Because what we are doing is so important, it's very, very important to question the whys more than knowing what we are building. Which is why you need a team of people who can always validate the assumptions and question the whys, so that we know if we're on the right track or not. Happiness. Happiness is such a relative term. I really cannot say that if you were happier earlier or happier now, but we can say that we have a lot more fun in the office, and we definitely are happy. We have badminton Fridays, we play ping pong all the time. And also I like coming to office so much more after the transformation. My work from homes have really cut down so much. Independence. You cannot really call teams that they own the product if you do not give them the independence to make decisions. So in my team, the engineers decide what features they want to pick, how long they want to work on a story, or what technologies they want to pick. It's all free for them. It's just that the only caveat is that you have to provide the right reasoning sometimes for why you're doing what you're doing. I think now Joe wants to share a story on Dell Digital Labs.
Yes. The balance team slide, you all saw a designer role in there. That was one of the things that were new to us before. We did have engineers and product managers or project managers at that point. But the role of designer became clear to us, more clear to us, in fact. We knew UX-based teams had a clear, roles and responsibility for a designer. There's a UX. But we had a lot of API teams. And so what's the designer role for an API to API interaction? That's really engineers figuring that out. We had one team in specific that was looking at a problem set, and it was an API, and the designer went and actually mapped out, yes, it's an API, and yes, there's an engineer designing it, quote unquote. But guess what? There's human beings putting data into it from the other side. So how is that authoring experience being fed into the APIs? How many authoring tools are there? And so he went and mapped out that human journey of how you actually send multiple data points from several tools that we had internally that finally make it into an API that abstracts all of that complexity. And we were then able to look at the problem a little bit differently in terms of it's not an API change that we necessarily need to make. It might be a process change or an authoring change. So the role of designer really became a very important value add for us, whereas before the transformation we were without a formal designer role on each team. I think, DePaul, you're going to continue on the last pillar of this transformation.
These are some pictures from the Dell Digital Labs that we have in Round Rock. Now let's get into process. I'm going to off track a little bit. I wanted to do guided meditation last year. So I went and I took this membership for a year. And for the first 2-3 months, I was not using it at all. Like I was using, say, once a week or twice a week. And then I had this phase in my life where things were going up and down, and I wanted to gather my thoughts together. So I started using it, and now I'm at a point that I'm going to renew it this year on 29th November. What do you think happened in this time frame? What really changed? The answer is actually quite simple. I just started seeing value in guided meditation. And if you look at digital transformation journey, this is exactly what it's all about. And here I want to talk about the great cross-company collaboration that we have had with Pivotal Labs. As somebody who was looking at the teams getting transformed from outside, because I was one of the lucky ones who got transformed earlier, I had these two sets of teams. The teams that were undergoing transformation and those who had just not started but were still following the practices because they had been asked by their leaders to do so. I saw that this set of people were able to do a much better job, were more disciplined, were more trained, and these people were just doing it for the sake of doing it. And one observation that I had was, because this set of people saw the value in the process, they knew why they were doing it. And to be honest, that's exactly how our brains are wired. We really are motivated to do something when we see value in it. Otherwise, it's just subconscious mind working at its best. And this team had not undergone this. So as part of our cross-company collaboration with Pivotal Labs, we were able to see the value in these processes. We had these boot camps with them, and it was so much helpful to see why we are doing what we are doing. Now, our cross-company collaboration was not restricted to just the boot camps that we had. It also expanded to how we could reach out to them whenever we wanted. I see Paul in the crowd. He connected me to one of the product managers at Pivotal Labs for Spring Cloud Data Flow. And I talked about Spring Cloud Data Flow earlier. We were using this technology, and we had so many issues with it, something that we were not able to look up on the internet. So we directly reached out to Pivotal Labs, and they was just so much helpful in getting us get past those problems. And this also worked the other way, where we were like customers to the Pivotal Labs, and we were giving constant feedback to how the product was. So we would have these weekly sync-ups or monthly sync-ups. We would talk about what is wrong with the product and how we can get past our issues. So cross-company collaboration is really something that has helped change our processes a lot. So let's talk about what are some practices that we follow. It's all very standard: continuous integration, continuous delivery. We use GitLab pipelines to do continuous integration and continuous delivery. We have multiple stages in it: integration tests, unit tests, security scans, and so much more. We do test-driven development. We write a failing test first, we make it pass, and then we refactor. As the product manager of the team, one practice that I follow is behavior-driven development. BDD is basically a framework which lets you define the stories in a fashion of given, when, and then, so that your engineers clearly know what you want to get communicated, and if you're writing the story in the right way or not. So I ensure that I follow BDD and pair programming. Pair programming essentially comes with three most important benefits. The first of them is learning, because you're constantly sitting with the next person and learning with that person. The second is context sharing, because you keep moving from one person to the other as your pair. You have the context of what's happening within the team. And the third one is the continuous review of the code that goes on when you follow this process of navigator and a driver, when the other person who's looking at your code can really tell you what's going wrong. But the key point I want to make on this slide is, again, a personal observation. You cannot just pick any of these practices, a permutation or combination of these practices, and expect magic to happen. It's not like tomorrow you pick up TDD and CI/CD and you expect, you do a killer job at it, you are really good at it. You cannot expect magic to happen, because magic really happens when you bring all of these three together. And if you closely observe, they're all very closely linked and related to each other. You're doing TDD because you want to keep your guards high, because you're directly pushing your code to production. You're also doing pair programming because you're directly pushing your code to production, so you want to have the confidence in you that the code that you're building is essentially the right code. I want to share a small story. We were doing this demo with one of the senior directors in Bangalore office, and I was a part-time product manager for that team at that point of time. And this team had this list of 10 to 12 microservices in PCF, and he just walks in and he just picks up one code and he writes into it a small method which is divided by 0. And then he says that if your pipeline fails, I'm going your entire team out to dinner tonight. But if it does not fail, you really are in a huge fix, because you're pushing code in my product directly to production without ensuring that such things are not taken care of. The good part is we really passed the test. The pipeline failed. But the most interesting part is I did not know what's going to happen. This kind of uncertainty, whether we are going to fail or whether we're going to pass, is always going to exist. And especially when you undertake this process of digital transformation, you're always going to be bound by these uncertainties. We went live 2 months back, and these are the same kind of uncertainties that everybody had around what's going to happen. So now that we have talked about this, let's talk about what are some tools that we use to keep our guards high. This is one of the tools that I was talking about. We have a joke within our team who would say something like, we build these tools so that we don't get disturbed at night. And hands down, I've seen the difference that has come up. There was a time when this tool did not exist. Then I was reaching out to my engineers at 12 a.m. And once this tool came in, nobody has contacted us in 2 weeks. So what it basically does is, like I said, our product is a pipeline which is taking data from multiple sources and pushing it down to product. You really cannot know what's happening in a system like that, right? This helps you visualize which event came at what time, how long did it take to get processed, what were the issues if it did not get processed. You can just hover over these green bars that you see, and you can see if there is any issue with this product. And you can also define the time range that you wanted to look into. So basically, this tool really lets you use our pipeline as a product. And this, I just want to call out that such tools are really, really helpful, because look at us. We are just literally saving ourselves nights of sleep by just building something as simple as this. So sometimes it's important to figure out what the real problem is and to go fix it. Solution may not be as complicated as we think. This is just the way we measure performance. We're using New Relic dashboard. And so we started off with a couple of pipelines, but now we have this long list of pipelines that we want to see and monitor. And we really did not have a view of what's happening in the system. So this dashboard just lets us see where the pipeline, if the pipeline status is green or red, or how many consumers we have, how many publishers we have, the average input and output, and so much more. And these are all in-house tools, except the New Relic, of course. These are all in-house tools that were created by the team. So some of the practices that helped us win. Lean principles. Definitely we follow lean principles of Eric Ries. If you see, we started off with a couple of pipelines, and now we have this huge long list of pipelines because we are iterating and building on top of it. We launched a couple of products 2 months back, and now we are ready to push any product into production. We do daily stand-ups to plan our days. We do IPMs to plan our week in sprint and know what stories we want to work on and how much do we want to point them. We do retrospectives to get feedback and to give feedback. I think this is one of the key practices that we follow. And scorecards. Scorecards is something that we follow across the organization. Digital transformation is such a qualitative and evolving journey that it's really, really important to quantify it a bit and to know if you're headed in the right direction or not. This at least gives us a hint of, what's the department where we probably need to improve more. Is it people, is it process, or is it technology? Stuff like this. So before I get into the conclusion of our talk, Joe, would you like to share a story again?
Absolutely. It was not set up previously at all. Pair programming was on one of the earlier slides, and that got, I think, the most. If I had to pick one thing that every engineer came and talked to me about, it would be that issue. especially the senior engineers, the story would go something like, I've been doing this for X years, never had to do pair programming, why are we doing it now? And do we really need to do this? I might want to check my bank statement. I don't want somebody sitting next to me looking at the same monitor, et cetera, et cetera. And this went on for weeks. So this one particular engineer, senior engineer, I said to him, look, let's give it a shot. Manager 101, let's give it a shot. Let's see what works and what doesn't work. Come back and tell me we could tailor it. There's always, room to tailor if we find that it's not working for us. So some time passes. About 3 months later, there was a need to go start up a POC, and it didn't need a full balanced team. It was just a thought at that point. And I went to the same engineer and said, I need you to just kind of go explore this thing for a couple days. He comes back and he says, listen, I got really used to this pair program. I need somebody to pair with me to come on this thing. I said, are you kidding me right now? I only have one person to take off on this PO. And it became an actual sticking point. Same person that was giving me grief. So I think just with anything else, as far as change, there is an initial resistance. And what we found is that, like perhaps many organizations, that the more you try something, the more you get acquainted with it, the more it starts to feel more natural and normal. So that was actually kind of an interesting part of the process transformation. So with that, I think we're going to wrap up of the overall summary of what we've learned.
Let's talk about challenges now. I think Joe already covered about pair programming adoption. That definitely is there for everybody. Let's talk about tribal knowledge versus well-documented processes. So as part of our journey, we had these pockets of people who knew what the systems looked like, who knew exactly what was to be done. And on the other hand, we had the well-documented processes given to us by the digital transformation teams and everybody. Now, how do we go and merge all of this together? We also had people who knew how digital transformation has to happen and what the process looks like. For my team in particular, a strategy that really worked well was to put people from both the domains together. So we had 3 people coming in with tribal knowledge, with the knowledge of what the platform looks like and what we are supposed to do. And we had 3 people who knew what digital transformation was like and how we had to go and transform. So when these 2 groups of people paired together, that's really when it worked. So I think the solution for this challenge is strategy, just to think for the right strategy that works the best in your company. I think our engineering leads did a really good job at it, in putting the right people together in the right team. Let's get into breaking old habits. A recent research, and I like quoting papers a lot. A recent research in European journal said that it takes 66 days, not 21 days, to get used to a new habit. And this varies from 18 days to 264 days. Because they had this research with 96 people, and the habit that they were trying to break was get 15 minutes of jog every day, and I think there was one more, cycling every day, something like that. And this was the range that it takes for humans to get used to a habit. Unfortunately, I could not get data on how long it takes to break a habit, but this is the wide range that we're talking about. So you really cannot say how long will it take for us to get digitally transformed, because you're talking about people here. There was a person who was able to jog 15 minutes regularly in 18 days, and the other person took 264 days. On an average 66 days. So what we really I'm trying to say is that the only solution to this challenge is to give it time. When people start seeing value in a process and they know what's happening, they really go and follow it. Because breaking old habits, scientifically speaking, is about changing your neurons there, and it's really not that easy. So that's a challenge that you're going to face, but time is the only solution to it. Let's talk about the lessons learned. Tooling is necessary. I'm a big fan of tools, mostly because my team used them and I saw so much advantage that they brought to it. Feedback. I think when you're starting on in a new journey, it's really, really important to know if you're doing the right thing. And the only way that you can know if you're doing the right thing is if you keep yourself open to feedback. So feedback is definitely one of the key things. You take it from your leaders, you take it from your peers, you take it from people who are working with you, anybody, everybody, all around you. Non-negotiable practices. Since digital transformation is such a process, even within the commerce platform, when I look at various teams going through digital transformation, each team is just so different. They all have their own ways of working because, again, we're talking about people and everybody adapts differently. But it's easy to get into this flow and say that, hey, I want to pick up this practice, but not this one, which is absolutely okay. But it's important to keep in mind that some practices are just non-negotiable because you need to have the right discipline in you as well. You cannot just keep on dropping, say, a pair programming or a TDD in the name of, oh, I'm free to drop a practice in digital transformation. So you really have to know what are some key non-negotiable practices that will bring the discipline that you need in the team. Transformation is possible for anyone. This is one of my favorites and probably the last point that I'm going to make. If you look at my journey and what I've spoken about in the past 1 hour, you will realize that my product is really a pipeline. And it's talking to multiple sources below and it's talking to multiple sources above, but that's all we are doing. We are not facing the direct customers. We do not have an API. We do not have a UI, and yet we are digitally transformed. So you cannot just say that digital transformation is not for all teams. It really works. You just have to know what's the best strategy for your team and what's going to work. The practices can be adopted anywhere, anytime. With that, I would like Joe to talk about what did we achieve.
Let's finish this up then. So for the teams that went through the transformation in earnest, there were some dramatic results, and this was kind of across the board. Release cycles, I mentioned centrally planned, kind of waterfall style, where things happen monthly, even quarterly, and with DevOps, ability to have a CI/CD pipeline with the appropriate amount of testing. Teams that went through this full transformation were able to deploy at will. Multiple times a day, in fact, for some of them, if they had defects, which we didn't have a lot of. Deployments, even during a release, actually X-copying code to servers would take, because of how many teams had to go in a specific sequence, it would take a while. So again, with PCF, not a big ordeal if your pipeline is structured correctly and you know how to deploy it without the right command. So we went from potentially days to minutes for the same application. And testing, of course, if you were leveraging a second team or another team to go do your full end-to-end test, meaning, okay, my application unit testing is good, but how does it work with the rest of the applications? That also affected some of the release, and we went from external testing to this DevOps style I was referring to earlier. And then finally, scalability was a big deal. Now, there's a caveat to this. I mean, again, with PCF, you could scale on demand if you have the infrastructure, right? I'm not saying it's a magic trick. So with the right max capacity, you could definitely scale at will with the autoscaler feature, as opposed to kind of how we were doing it traditionally with VMs, and you needed a long cycle to go provision hardware dedicated specifically for the app. So tremendous changes, and it was, again, a big deal for our organization, for those teams that have transformed in earnest and the ones that still are on the pathway. So I think we can conclude and open up Q&A for all of you. Anybody who wants to lead us off with the first question? I know there was, yes, sir.
Is this something that you're trying to do only for Dell as a client, or are you trying to do this, commercialize this outside?
So commercialize the platform as the product aspect of it? So that's a very good question. I should have wrote this prepared answer. Yes, we did consider it, but there's always the risk of trying to do too much at once, and we could have lost track of what we were trying to do. So I think if you want to think of an overall strategy, what we're trying to do is make sure we could structure ourselves internally with a product-based approach just for what we do, and say we had the same amount of teams doing the same net, but internally we're leveraging a product using our own style consulting, that would then give us perhaps the fulcrum to say, okay, we do have a product that could work for other use cases, but we're trying to solve ourselves first. I'll put it that way. Does that make sense?
Yes, have you thought of having commercial, the actor that does a digital using this use case?
Oh yeah, I actually, I did reach out to the marketing department and tried to. Yeah. The guy from what's that series on HBO?
Westworld.
Westworld, yes, that guy. I think you all have seen the commercials that we're talking about. There were, listen, Dell Technologies is an essential infrastructure company. So we obviously have to solve our in-house and do our core business first and foremost. So there were some internal talks. There is that lure and promise. And one of the exciting things for me is that we do run quite a complicated business internally. And if we're able to model it appropriately with a product, I'm pretty sure it would rival a lot of what's commercially available. But that's a big undertaking. You actually need just a separate effort to do that, in my opinion.
My second question is the eat your own dog food
Yeah.
statement.
Yes.
Go out publicly saying, not only we're trying to sell you guys doing this, we did it ourselves, and it turned out to be extremely positive for us.
Yes. Yes. There again. Yes. I did think there were conversations. In fact, there's some folks here in the audience that maybe 2 years ago you might have forgotten this, Michael. People in the Pivotal office thought I had two heads when I was talking about, hey, perhaps we could offer some services in the marketplace that are platform services that are generic enough that perhaps anybody could use a product modeling domain, or anybody could use a search capability as a service. So there were conversations. Again, it would require a lot of effort to do that in earnest, I think. And the promise is there, and we need to solve what we have internally first. But you're absolutely right in following the breadcrumbs on that. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Were your designers always dedicated to a team, or were there cases where you could share them across multiple teams?
Initially, they were dedicated, and then we did get some constraints on, how many designers can we hire all at once. I mean, the market for those who are trying to hire designers, you all know, not easy. So there was some sharing, and then there was some. I hate to say this after the API story. We did find that we didn't need a designer, say 100% on an API team, in which case we did kind of move them around. But it wasn't, if we had all the budget in the world, we would have preferred dedicated, because you want that longevity of thought on the team, especially with something design sensitive. Other questions?
Okay, well, actually.
Go ahead. Yes, sir.
Your transformation that you mentioned and talked about, was it a top-down effort internally, or was it more of a bottom-up, or was it just a typical rep calling you every day, bugging you?
Great question. I would say the first wave was top, and then the second wave was kind of bottom. And so the first wave was, look, we are a combined organization. We need to, demonstrate to the public that we could do what we're selling. And so there was that planning initially about, I want to say, a couple of years back. And I was involved in the early effort to start up that small circle I showed on one of the slides. And then the next swell was, okay, now that we're doing this, there's a whole bunch of architectural things we had to solve for anyway, right? Before, I think if you go to any organization, there's always your kind of subject matter experts who are waiting, if we could only get this opportunity to go rehash how we did this thing that's now a pain in the butt for us, architecturally speaking, not personnel. So that was the second wave in which we said, okay, well, now that we're in this transformative approach where we're going to be lean and do things quicker, let's try to solve for some of the pain points we've had all along. And some of that was what Dipali was calling out with being tightly coupled, right? The more you could abstract, traditionally, again, these were organizations that were obviously apart from each other. So Dell knew how to model Dell products, EMC perhaps the same. And there was different levels of maturity on which one was built organically, which companies were leveraging internal products that were customized now. So there was a little bit of both, to answer your question. The second wave was the interesting one. Actually, both of them were interesting to me, but the second wave allowed sort of a meeting of the minds with, okay, this is not just for the sake of, we actually want to use this transformation vehicle to solve our problems.
Was it relegated just to the e-commerce division?
To start with. But then we also have teams who are doing this. For example, we have Trigger and EMC. We have more departments doing that already. But I just want to call out that Joe put it really nicely. I remember this time that as a product manager when I started, I used to huddle everybody and say, oh, we have to go for a retro. I would just call them, are you coming, are you coming, are you coming? Or you have to go for an IBM. And lately it's been like, we didn't do retro this week, what just happened? So you see the transformation. When people get used to the style of working, it actually becomes bottoms up. And I think that was a really good point that Joe made. It was both.
Yes. And to your question about the question again was it commerce-oriented only?
Yeah, the transformation, or was it a broader corporate effort?
So we have multiple transformation efforts, yes. Yeah. And including our manufacturing, all the life cycle of our business process, internally. So on our side, the commerce platform was key because again, it is the engine that powers a lot of the experiences internally and externally. So I hope that answers your question. Anybody else?
Yeah,
We got
go
some
ahead.
time.
Was there anything that you did that you thought was really going to succeed and ended up flopping? And anything you thought had no chance of working and trying to be extremely successful that you
So the first part, my answer would be the answer I gave you 2 questions ago. I thought that had a chance, perhaps. Hey guys, look, we could do something here that's generic. No, I'm kidding, because again, we have to solve. No organization, at least the healthy one's going to say, "Oh, go off in a dark room and figure something out we didn't ask for," right? So you got to balance what needs to be, the outcome for our stakeholders, and then along with what we know we have to do before a stakeholder even asks us. So the thing. Maybe I'll give DePaul, what was the thing you thought was going to work that didn't work?
Something that was...
Not to put you on the spot.
I think there were times, especially I want to call out, I can't take product example here, but within the commerce platform NBC, there were such, for example, Search has been such a great example. We all started together. But some teams just did such a phenomenal job at digital transformation. And when I say phenomenal job, I mean in all aspects, and I want to highlight that it also means the performance aspect of it. Because when, as a company, you're getting a chance to revamp yourself, it's a chance for you to look at a very deep level at what all changes can you make. You just don't think of people or process, you think all round. So when we started off, some really good products came out. I think some great stories, Vocas is one. We have some really good stories that came out when we started because people took this as an opportunity to really go and revamp the entire system. What I showed you about product right now, I call product also really, really successful. You won't believe it. It's hard to believe, but when we went live, at least for my team, we literally had just 3 defects, and that were not defects related to tech at all. So we really did a good job at building our technology in such a manner that we were good at what we were doing. So I think there are tons of good stories. This is just one example. But the key point is we revamped all over. So any shortcomings that were existing in a product were taken care of as part of this entire journey that we took.
I got an answer for the second part of that. So I think the second part you asked, what did we think was not going to work that actually turned out to work, right? I thought a lot of our legacy applications were going to have problems, real challenges getting replatformed on the PCF or even PKS now, as is, so that we can move everything away. Now, there's the debate about what's the point of taking a monolith and moving it onto a stack. And I would say, for the simplistic benefit would be you don't have to couple yourself to dedicated hardware. You can now have a separation from infrastructure, even if it's the same monolith hosted over here. If there's an operating change or if there's an infrastructure change, say the hardware is EOL, you don't have to have this big vertical effort where you go all the way to the application team and down. So I thought that would have been a very difficult lift, and I was really surprised to see how quickly we, as an organization, came up with innovative ways to handle moving all our applications, or have a plan to move all our applications to PCF and PKS. So that was a surprise, because on the surface it looked like a very heavy lift, and again, there was some people that adopted the mindset, and I think that helped. And then once they, the real story there is that when people got familiar with PCF, the engineers specifically, they figured out how they could use it. But in the beginning, it was, what is this thing? Do we need it? The same storyline as the pair programming. And once the familiarity came, the ingenuity came with it. Any other questions? Are we almost done on time?
Yeah, we have like 5 minutes more.
Comments? Questions?
Did you generally pair senior and junior, or junior and senior? Or how do you?
Yeah, that was a good one. That's a good one. So I think it was a little bit of all of that, a little bit of both. I saw, some junior engineers perhaps questioning, why is this person a senior engineer? I've seen them in their glory now. No. But there was a little bit of all of that. What we tried to do, what was really cool was we had college hires initially that we paired with senior people, and it was just amazing how quickly they were, when given the right direction, how quickly they were able to ramp up, and they didn't have that, perhaps any of the old mindset of, hey, what is this PCF thing? I don't need it. And so that was actually pretty successful, being able to take a new hire that had a lot of good motivations, that's trying to start off on a good note, and then senior person that still was easy to get along with. No, I'm kidding. That would pair up and show them sort of the ropes. And so that was successful. And then senior to senior, we tended to not have multiple lead type of people on the one team. We'd spread them out. So that was a little less frequent.
Yeah, I think the same goes for my team. The college hires were really quick to pick up. And they were really working at a level that when I started industry, I can't imagine working at that level. So really worked well for them. And I think also it depends a lot on the team dynamics and how people really want to work. For the most part, at least in my team, people have freedom to who they want to pair with, but at the same time, we really ensure that if they're pairing with the same person for say 2 or 3 weeks at an end, like you really need to switch. So it's the good part is that they have the freedom, right? So when you say you pair a junior and a senior, well, the leadership puts that intention in, but nobody's forcing them to be together. So there's no force in who you want to pair with.
Everybody having a good conference so far? Yeah? Okay. I see you looking at your phones. Don't worry, I would have done the same. I'm just teasing. So any other questions before we wrap up? Okay, thank you all for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you.